Very good. So we're convened. It's Tuesday, June 20th, and I don't know why this says Monday, June 19th. Oh, it was revised then. Okay, good. David, can you read the agenda, please?
Sure. First call to order, reading of the agenda and vote to approve or amend the agenda. Add topics not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance, and I'm not sure that there are any of those items. Then continuation of CM&D interviews with Eric Johnson and consideration of hiring or next steps.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the agenda.
I have a,
Give an addition?
yeah.
Okay.
The original posting for this called for a section on public comment, and that's been deleted. I'd like to put that back in.
Do you want to put it back at the end?
Yeah, because you wiped it off for tonight.
Well, before the last item, consideration of hiring or next steps, can we put it between those two?
Public comment on that topic?
Anything the public wants to bring forward.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to keep this to a single topic meeting, Paul. You know, whatever others want to do, obviously I'll do, but it seems to me we had our regular meeting last week, we had public comment at that meeting. And then we had additional public comment at the end of that meeting.
I have no objection to public comment.
You want to have public comment now?
Sure.
All right, good. Well, we'll have public comment. Anybody have any public comments?
There wasn't a sign-up sheet,
You want to sign up, Susan?
possibly.
Go ahead. Have time for your comment. That's what people want to do.
No comment.
You don't have any comments? Okay. Anybody else have comments?
I have a public comment.
Sir?
No, oh no, please.
Andy Erico, 73 Washington Street. I know we were talking about hiring a new Boston Highway Department. And I just want to make sure that we hire the right guy. Doesn't matter who it is, we're not taking sides, just that's the right person. I feel like the last few years or so, the infrastructure of the roads has been depleted and really not good work in the winter. Snow plowing has been really atrocious. The fact that the police have to make a phone call and say the roads are slippery, it's too late at that point. So whoever you hire just really needs to be on top of things a little bit more than has been in the past. And I live on Route 16, they repaved that road. My family business, not my business, but my other family has paved roads since they've invented asphalt. And it just wasn't done right. And storm drains are still dropped. And, you know, if you're running the highway department, you have to hit the same potholes that I hit. In fact, they're not filled in. They fill potholes and they have bags of with something that you buy at Home Depot. And it's just not really a commercial use, highway use. And I've probably blown 3 tires in my trailers, hitting potholes. The damage that's done to police cruisers, even though you don't know it, like suspension, mirrors, the town trucks, because of the branches that hang. So it's like nothing's really been done. I just think you need to hire someone that's proactive and you don't need a meeting about picking up a branch off or filling in a pothole. I just feel like nothing's really been, instead of widening roads and making things better, they look like quilts. They cut out little patches. And, it's just gone downhill, I think, in the last few years. So, I think for the most part, the town's run pretty well. I know it's a difference when we hired a new police chief. Before, nothing was really done. I'm driving down the road here at Pine Hill. There's an accident, they're directing traffic. So the school buses split out. But finally, someone, they're trying. Not everyone likes everything the police do, but at least they're trying to do something. I think you just need to have a guy that is proactive and fixes the road. It's the easiest town you can work in. There's no water, there's no sewer, there's no 2 a.m. phone calls at a pipe is burst, so, and I take care of the cemetery. The rest of the mowing is subcontracted out, the building, whatnot, so what do? They take care of the roads, and snow plowing. So it's not really that difficult to stay on top of that. I just don't feel, and it's not the guys that work there. It's just like my truck. It says my name on it, town of Sherborn, it's whoever runs that highway department, he's responsible. You don't point fingers, oh, well, this guy didn't do this, and this guy. It comes on you. It's like, if someone doesn't like the job I did at their house, it's not, well, my guy did this or that. No, it's my fault. I'm responsible for the company. I think the morale of the guys in the last few years has gone down the tubes because when you go to work and you're not happy with the work environment, it's nice to have someone say good morning or maybe buy the guy's coffee once in a while. You know, I drive by and I saw the highway boss with Bermuda shorts and loafers and a polo shirt. Is it going to cape or what's going on? That's not how you dress. I mean, you guys are attorneys, you're dressed, you look like an attorney. You dress the part, even if you're not digging the hole. So I think just get someone in there that really cares about the job and benefit the town. So I think just think long and hard as to who we're going to hire to run the highway department. So it's a safe environment for everyone to drive the cars.
Thanks, Andy.
What's the protocol we stand up for? Mike, I make a brief comment. I wanted to apologize to the board and to David. Last Thursday's meeting, my wife's father passed away, and in the scramble of getting down to Washington, D.C. to be there with Libby, I failed to call and let you all know that I was going to be here, so I apologize for that. That was it was a chaotic day, but it was, so just wanted to apologize to
Thanks, Joe.
the three of you and to David.
We were just glad you were okay. We thought you'd hit a pothole. We weren't sure.
Glad that Libby was okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Joe?
Sean Flanagan, Everett Street in Sherborn. I've been here 32 years. I think we've had, three, four highway directors since I've been here. I think it's important that the person you hire not only has a job in Sherborn, but has a commitment to this town. Maybe he lives in this town, his family lives in this town. I know maybe this is politically incorrect. You have one candidate you're looking at, who was born in this town, currently works in this town, his wife is born in this town, his wife's family lives in this town. We have one person that you're looking at that I would encourage you to take a hard look at, because that gentleman has a commitment to the town, not only a job in this town. And that's what this town needs. We now have a police chief that has a commitment to this town, that lives in this town. This is a small town. And again, there were many nights or days that I would see the recent highway director running around in shorts and a t-shirt and loafers. And it was almost an embarrassment for a highway director running any town to be dressed like that on a work day. And I saw it many, many times. And we do have one gentleman that is also on the fire department. He has a commitment to this town. And I think it's important that we look to people to work in this town, to run this town, that live in this town, and have a commitment, a personal commitment to the town of Sherborn, and not necessarily just a job in the town of Sherborn. You guys all live in this town. That's why you're here tonight. Because you've taken the choice to be a selectman and keep running these meetings and have a commitment to the town of Sherborn, not just a job in the town of Sherborn. That's my comment.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Joe?
Excuse me. Sean just said most of what I had to say. I'd like to second everything he said. It seems to me you have a very strong, obvious candidate, and this may be out of line, but if it were up to me, I would hire him unless there are issues. There are a lot of people here that know the fire department and so forth. I would simply ask, like Neil and others, how is he to work with and all that. I have no idea. I'm new to this environment, although I have been here in Sherborn since '87, almost as long as you have. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. It may be out of line, but you're welcome to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to try to not get into individual recommendations. I mean, the kind of general comments Andy made, I think, are fair game. We've got another candidate we're going to interview tonight before we start having discussion about individuals. If the board wants, we can have more comment after the interviews, but
I'd like that.
I don't think,
If people take the time to show up,
well, I know we tried to do comment the other day, and then you tried to cut comment off, Paul, so I think we'll do it after the interviews, if that's okay with everybody. So, let's move on to we should probably vote on the agenda. I'm not sure we ever actually did that with Paul's addition of public comment.
Move to approve as amended.
second.
Okay, all in favor? All right. So next we have our fifth candidate who was not able to make it here on Thursday, and that's Eric Johnson. I know Eric's in the room, and Eric, if you could come up to the microphone, we did, and thanks for coming in, Eric. We did have a discussion with 4 other people on Thursday night. We had some questioning, and we want to give you the same opportunity we gave them in roughly the same format. The way those discussions started, we gave the candidate time to introduce themselves and describe their background as much or as little as you care to do, and you know, your interest in the position, and then we'll give the selectmen an opportunity to ask some questions, and then give you an opportunity to conclude with any comments or statements or questions you have. Okay? Thanks,
Good.
Eric.
Thank you. First of all, though, I want to say thank you for conducting this second meeting. Last Thursday, I had a long-term commitment. I actually was presenting before the New England chapter, American APWA, and since I actually was a presenter, I could not get rid of that obligation. So thanks again for having me here on Tuesday. Should I begin a little bit about myself?
Yeah,
Does
that's
everyone have a
whatever
resume?
you want to say. Yep, we do have your resume, but
Anyone in the audience want a
others out
resume?
there may not have your resume yet. And you can feel free to pass it out if you want to.
Yeah. I know there's a stack. There's 7 of them right there. Well, I guess starting my education, I have a Bachelor's of Science from Tufts University of Civil Engineering. I have a master's degree, interdisciplinary master's degree from Idaho State, focusing on environmental science, largely called hazardous waste management. Since about '97, I started my career largely working in the environmental field with the assessment and the design of treatment systems. I worked on the design, installation, and operation of treatment systems, starting again in '97 from small ones until very, very large, high-capacity treatment systems, working for the military and the railroad and so on. In 2005, I assumed a position as the senior water and wastewater engineer for the town of Framingham. In that capacity, my responsibility was to essentially manage capital projects, take care of the water sewer operation means, and also to reactivate the Birch Road well field, which is a second most productive aquifer in the state of Massachusetts. And the town was looking to reactivate it, going through the permitting and the pilot testing and so on to reactivate that. About at that same time, Framingham went through quite a change. They became much more of an investment in their essentially in their capital needs, and infrastructure, water, sewer, facilities, and roadway. Really from years of deferred maintenance, but I really don't want to take anything short from the residents, because the residents of Framingham really, I thought, did a great job coming together and putting in an investment. So at that point, I transitioned to be what they call a new position. It was called the Director of Planning and Design, and that's why I really oversaw and coordinated the capital program for the town of Framingham. I hired brand new staff, I created the policies and procedures, and I really started a program that, by the time I stepped out of it, had accomplished about $250 million worth of work and managed to position about $30 million of grant funding. Again, largely based on public works infrastructure, water, sewer, drain, roadway, and their facilities. About, I think it was October of 2014, I stepped over to kind of more of an operational, engineering operation means. I became, you know, the statutory town engineer for the town of Framingham. From that point, doing more of the inspections, the day-to-day engineerings, traffic optimization, signal optimization, GIS, survey, big boom in commercial development. Probably have around 40-plus significant planning board permits a year, so I have about 3 inspectors that go out and do that, plus the smaller inspection work. And more recently, taking on the expanding NIPD's program and getting our arms around the town's stormwater system. I could go on forever, but that more or less summarizes, again, from the beginning of my career to the end. Right now, I manage a group of about 17 staff, combination of union bargaining unit and professional exempt staff, and all kind of in the public works atmosphere.
Okay, thank you. We can start questioning Chuck.
Eric, could you describe to us your connections with Sherborn, how long you've lived here, and whether or not you think, as a resident of Sherborn, that would make your job easier or more difficult?
Well, yeah, I was born in town, 1970. Lived in town to about 94 when I moved away and went to grad school. Moved back in 2006 and kind of, you know, very invested into the town. Come from actually multi-generational within Sherborn. In fact, interesting thing, the house that I live in actually came from the bricks of the old Solomon Academy. So I have some pretty strong roots in town, and I actually have, you know, long-term intentions in town. In fact, it is the reason I actually am applying for this job. So I want to make it clear, I'm actually not looking for another job. I actually am very happy and been well employed, and I've been continuously employed for 20 years with progressive advance from that. It really is that this is kind of, you know, a great opportunity and a chance really to serve the town that served me and my family for years. And when I saw it was combined with a public facilities and a town engineer position, I knew then that, you know, I thought it was right to look for a kind of a that the town was now looking for a seasoned professional. Like other people have commented, I've seen many DPW directors come and go over the years. Usually people who are coming up from the ranks, and what you see is the people who use it as a stepping stone for a next position, they do okay, and they'll do okay for 3 to 4 years because that's what they're doing. Other people might be more topped off in their skill set, and I think you're now looking for something a bit different there, and I hope that I can fulfill that opportunity.
And do you view being a resident in town, how do you view that impact on your ability to do the job?
I think it'll help it, if not make a difference, really, because you are a professional. I am a professional. We really, you know, you should do your best job no matter what. Right now, I work right next door at a high-profile position, except for, you know, instead of 4,000 people seeing me on TV, 70,000 people see me on TV. I've been approached many times when I go out. Just a few months ago, I was at the Sherborn Heritage, and we started chatting with someone sitting next to us, and he was a Framingham resident who was wondering if his retaining wall was actually in the road right away. I mean, this is a lifestyle position. This is not a job. Whether Framingham or here, if you treat a general public works job as a job, it's not. I consider myself on 24/7.
Any more, Chuck? Paul?
Who's William Sedowitz?
He's the chief engineer for the town of Framingham. He largely oversees more the capital program, where I oversee the operational program.
Do you report to him?
Yes.
Who else reports to him?
I mean, it's hard to, I could draw out an org chart for you, but
That's what I'm trying to get a sense of the org chart.
okay, under municipal engineering, just me and the 17 people underneath me, and then underneath him, there's a couple senior engineers who then oversee project managers.
And who does Bill Sedowitz report to?
Peter Sellers, the director of public works.
And who does the Director of Public Works report to? Nancy White, whatever her name is? Or the
To
town-
Bob Halpin, the town administrator.
Okay, the town administrator. Town manager.
Town manager, yes.
And he reports to the Board of Selectmen.
Correct.
Have you ever been a DPW superintendent?
There are no superintendents in the town of Framingham, so I'm unsure what you mean, but are you talking like an operational director?
Well, who runs the DPW department?
The entire DPW is run under Peter Sellers.
Have you ever held a position like that?
No.
When, when you were, you were there for, you've been there for 12 years.
A little under, but yeah.
Did you have occasion to work on General Chemical?
Not too much. I advised a little bit, but that's largely under the Board of Health, and the Board of Health has an in-house LSP. I've just advised on some of the utility interactions that they've had and so on.
And what-
LSP is a licensed site professional, for those of you that don't know the acronyms.
The, our town administrator is from Framingham. Did you have occasion to work with him when he was at Framingham and you were at Framingham?
We interfaced a little bit.
On what issues?
Mostly when I went before the Board of Selectmen, usually for something like a property acquisition or something like that, I would interface with him. I probably go before the Board of Selectmen every third or fourth meeting they have.
In your resume, you describe your function as, quote, "I provide technical input and policy recommendations to multiple town departments, committees, boards, and town meeting." Is that a fair summary of your
Yeah.
function?
That's some of what I do. I do even more than that.
What more do you do?
Largely the line management of the actual group itself and the program of the group. For example, we are considering, depends how things go with the reorganization of the government, actually altering some staffing and increasing it to prepare ourselves for the new NIPD's permit. And that's, you know, the town manager largely looks to me to look for those programmatic, strategic suggestions. I also lead a street acceptance program. The town of Framingham had when I came on, around 150 unaccepted or private ways, and I helped strategize with special legislation to actually move forward, and in 2.5 years, we've accepted 19 roadways, kind of making up for the sins of the past. I also help out with easements that have not been properly documented and having them recorded in the Register of Deeds, general legal counsel. I've been the town representative on 4 lawsuits during construction. I mean, wherever they need essentially professional staff or strong line management.
Well, isn't the chief engineer responsible for the finances and budget for the engineering division?
For capital, I'm responsible for the municipal engineering department.
Now, Framingham's population is 70,000, if I'm correct.
It's officially 68 something.
It's the second largest town in the Commonwealth before it became a city.
Correct. I thought it was the largest, but it's up there.
I thought Brookline was larger, but
I think it's 60. I think Brookline's 60. In fact, once Framingham becomes a city, the largest in the country will be Greenwich, Connecticut.
okay. And the population of Sherborn is 4,500 or less?
I thought it was 42 and change,
4,200.
yeah.
Sherborn doesn't have a town engineer and doesn't have 17 people assisting the town engineer. do you feel that you have sufficient breadth to do more than permitting and drawings and land acquisition and so on, but to actually handle everything as chief chef and chief bottle washer?
That's how I started my career. My employee number, my first company was 0006, and it was a company of 7. And I can assure you, not metaphorically, I was literally in the trenches, installing pipe, installing equipment, calling up subcontractors myself, doing all the subcontract. I turned into a project manager less than 6 months after starting my career. And believe me, in that situation, you did do everything. Even my early days at DPW, the actual size of the department was a fraction of what it is now. And I learned everything from simply, like, how to create a PO, how to go to town meeting, to, getting out there in the field. I've had calls at 2 in the morning for 6-foot sinkholes in the middle of Water Street. So I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty, and I'm not afraid to take care of, the smaller things. Right, toward the latter part of my career, you do evolve. Like many people evolve in your career, you evolve to a point where you delegate more than you do. But I spent a lot of my career both being a doer and a delegator.
Well, you're talking about, you said when you started your career, that's RAM Environmental?
Yep.
Down in Plymouth? But for the DPW in Framingham, how many people are employed by the DPW department?
I think it's about 170.
And in that DPW department, have you ever snowplowed a street?
Have I ever dropped a blade? No.
Yes. You ever had to deal with a broken-down machine?
Yes. And let me ask for a question. Is the intent of this position, pending a snowmageddon or a large emergency, to have a director that will also be a plow driver?
I think the intent of the position is it's a small town. You end up doing a little bit of everything.
I understand that. I definitely understand that. But
I'm
there is...
just testing that.
Yeah,
You
there is a
said you were-
transition between the, between a leadership and essentially a doer. And I just wanted to make sure, because I also wanted to, like I said, I've gotten a sense over the last 40-something years that you've hired snowplowers and now you're looking for a director. So I just want to make sure that I have the right intention as well. But as far as the ability to do, absolutely. Have I dealt with a broken down machinery? Yeah. In the early days, when I actually maintained treatment systems, I would be out there changing a positive displacement blower with my own hands, doing the whole thing, wiring it, which I probably shouldn't have been doing. And
But that's a sewer line, right?
what?
That was a sewer line?
No, that was for a remediation system. Positive displacement blower was used, and it's a certain piece of equipment. Changed pumps, changed blowers. I've changed equipment. Throughout the early part of my career, absolutely.
What percentage of your work would you say is water and sewer work?
Less now. It started heavy water and sewer. It's less now. Really, most of what I do now is I guess on a technical side would be roadway and drainage, and GIS and survey and inspection.
And what inspections do you do?
Well, again, I oversee the inspectors, but if it comes to something controversial, they call me and I get out there and I make the call. But for large permitings, for, if you're aware of the planned unit development that went on in the north part of Framingham, it's approximately 200 units, a combination of rentals and kind of condoized homeowner associations. Some smaller ones, small dead ends that have been like 6 units at a time for housing developments and any kind of mitigation that they have to do. I'll be involved again with more controversial ones. I was just on the phone today with a developer who's looking to put in a new 200-unit apartment building in Framingham, renegotiating some of the mitigation. Usually I'll be the one that'll determine and negotiate a lot of off-site mitigation for these developments as well.
Off-site mitigation being roadway improvements, things like that?
It could be anything, but yeah, roadways is the one we had today. It could be water, sewer, drain, roadway, anything. It really depends on the impact of the development.
But in terms of the inspections, what, you're not the building inspector, so what are you inspecting for?
Really it's their impacts to utilities and to the roadway. So even if it's on site, the installation of a sewer service connection, for example, or installation of a looped water line, in a sense, or BMP, or a recharge system for a stormwater system.
Okay.
And any work done in the roadway itself. My department issues about 600 permits a year for people who want to enter the roadway, and that's a heavy amount of inspection as well. So if NSTAR Gas comes in, you want either put a new main line in or a new service, they come with us, pull a permit. We have policies and procedures that go in. We determine the level of restoration that's necessary, and we'll close out the permit.
I think that's it.
Mark?
Thanks. Well, thanks again for coming in.
Thanks, Mark.
You know, we've changed, as you noted, we've changed this job a little bit from what's primarily an operational job to one that also includes, you know, an engineering function. And, you know, clearly from your resume, I'm not concerned about the engineering side of things. I'm really interested to learn more about your operational style, your experience. I mean, you've been doing this for, I don't know how much supervisory experience you had before the current job, but you've been doing it for about 3 or 4 years now.
I've probably been building up from a small number for about, probably about 8 to 9 years. I first was given 1 employee, and then 3, and then 6, and then
Right.
17.
And the bargaining unit staff, are you involved in the contract?
Just recommendations. The ultimate negotiation actually is between town council, so I'll make recommendations either to Peter or so on, and then they will make recommendations on from there.
Do you have visibility of the process?
Oh,
So tell us, you know, about your management style. How do you interact with people? These 17 people, did you bring them in? Were they there? Have you changed any of them out?
Yep.
Why don't we start with that and see where we go?
I mean, the 17, some I brought in, most are already there. In the previous group I had, I brought them all in. But in this particular case, moving over to this group, I brought some of them in. They've all known me ahead of time because I've been in the department, so I had, you know, relationships with all of them beforehand. You know, we've had some change-outs. There's no question about that. You know, I tried, in general, for my style, you know, if someone, let's say, isn't fulfilling their role, but yet they seem like they have a good work ethic, I can usually set someone up to win and put someone in a good position, set them up to succeed and not fail. If I see certain core attributes such as work ethic and stuff like that lacking, then I make directions and I make moves to go another direction. And, you know, I try not to do it too much, but a handful of times I've had to go another direction. But overall, I believe that my staff, and I'll actually give you references to people who have worked for me, my staff respects me, appreciates me. You know, sometimes I try to keep things lighthearted, but when something needs to get done, it needs to get done, and that's one of the most important things. I treat every individual like an adult, whether bargaining unit or not. You are an adult, you have realistic expectations. I communicate those expectations. To anyone that I've unfortunately had to let go, none of them have been surprised by the time it's actually happened, because it's been open communication along the way, and it's essentially been a progressive accountability throughout the whole process. And, you know, in those few times it's happened, I think it's overall helped morale, because most people want to actually be functional during the day. Most people want to actually have a product that they show for. And I think what, you know, can hurt a place is when you have someone that doesn't want to, you know, play by those rules. And, you know, when you take care of that, then I think it helps the overall group.
Can you give a little more detail about how you take somebody who's an underperformer and get them to, I think you said, win or succeed?
Sure. I had someone. I'm going to remain vague about it because this is on TV, who basically I thought lacked certain skill sets, like professional skill sets like writing and things like that, but I saw what the person were good at, and I basically positioned them into projects that really had more of a field component and basically allowed more of a roll up your sleeves, get it done, and that person's done great. Probably one of the better ones out there, and took them out of certain expectations of, you know, writing contracts and writing scopes. It really wasn't in their skill set. And I've had someone who was basically the complete opposite of that. You know, not as comfortable in the field, and I was able to manage them, put them into, you know, more of a, you know, desk-type position and so on like that. But in every single case, they had a willingness to try and a good work ethic, and that's the core the core skills you have.
So what would the first 60 days look like?
I mean, if, in this position here, at the beginning, I'll definitely sit down with the foreman, get an idea what they do day to day and what projects are coming up overall. Then I would sit down with each individual staff member as well. I think there's only 7. So it'll be, I'll be able to really get to know each person and get an idea of their thoughts. And then I'll basically shadow them. I'm going to be going out in the field, seeing what they do, and spending time out there and, getting an idea of what goes on. In the first 60 days as well, I also want to take a little assessment of some of the training and safety training. That's something that's very important to me. I believe I had heard, maybe you know better than I do, that there's been some workman's comp claims and so on, and I think, that's something of a concern. If you heard about Plainville, but in the last few years, just in surrounding towns, there have been 3 on-the-job deaths in public works over the last few years, and I think that you have to take very seriously even simple things like CPR, first aid, then your 10-hour construction in confined space, and just make sure that you have and repeated training. I'm not sure what's in the budget, but you should find room to make sure you have annual renewals for a lot of these training.
So how would you measure if you're being successful?
I would have to see the work that has been done and basically have we met goals. You have to set forth goals that you have, be it half-year and year goals, and are you meeting those goals, And that is a true measure of success. That's how people measure my success, and that's how I meet people who work for me, I measure their success. And that's to meet the program, The Public Works is a program of both operations and capital. And you have to set those milestones and set those goals kind of on both those venues and make sure you complete them.
But are there specific metrics you could imagine you would put in place?
I mean, metrics, like the classic metrics you do with anything is like, square foot of asphalt or miles of roadway, number of outfalls, you know what I mean? The NIPD's permit adds quite a bit of structure onto your stormwater system there, where you have to do the catchment areas and so on. You actually have annual milestones to do that. But, you take the metrics, I'm not sure, but I'm assuming there's some kind of asset management with the town. So you have miles of roadway, you have the age of the surface, you have miles of drain pipe, you have number of outfalls, and you can literally take those metrics to go through. But the big picture is still, I do believe, the goals, because the goals actually, that's what I think, or you think, or people think should be accomplished and what is reasonable.
Yeah, I was actually thinking more about, operational metrics in terms of the organization's efficiency.
So you're talking like hours of overtime, like I'm not sure, I see things essentially in end result.
Your area of expertise,
Exactly.
not mine.
And I don't measure it. I don't measure it by, the hours worked. I measure it by the amount done. It really is, it's the amount that you've completed. Because if you look too small, at, we spent this many hours doing this and that many hours doing that, that doesn't measure the end result. The metrics that I measure in my department, are the number of permits, the miles of pipe, the miles of roadway, the number of intersections, the number of outfalls. Those are the metrics that I use there. I will look at the budget and make sure the overtime is commensurate with that, but for the most part, it is the work that's being done.
So, you've clearly got a lot of career in front of you still, and, you're going to be potentially moving from a large organization to having, more responsibility in a smaller organization. I understand that. I've done that myself. But where do you see this going in the long term?
I would like to come on and actually add, not just a professional element, but actual structure and something for future generations to build on within the Department of Public Works. I would like to actually, essentially create the procedures, create the structure, and create some uniform goals like I talked about before. As for asking my future on it, I would like to think I'd be here for the long term. I mean, on paper, just like you indicated, if someone were to look at this in my career, they might not see it as a step up to some degree. I'm here because it's basically a community I love, and it's an opportunity that just doesn't come on that often, that when you professionalize this position. So like I said, I would definitely like to create the professionalism and the structures within this. I would like to think I'd be here for the long term. You know, I think it's safe to say this isn't a leverage point to go get another job. I think I'm pretty good the way that is right now. I would almost argue that, you know, it might not be more responsibility. Where I am now, I have signature authority up to $200,000 on contracts. I pretty much am given pretty carte blanche authority to manage my staff as I see fit. That also could be because people have a certain level of trust with me, because I've done it pretty well over the last few years in that sense there. I hope that I'm given a fair amount of, you know, latitude and kind of judge me by my performance, not my means. Well, my means would be fine, but don't worry about every little thing. Just worry about goals getting done, because that's how I operate best, and under my own policies and procedures.
Thanks.
Okay. Hi, Eric. Thanks again for coming in. I wanted to talk with you about your experience on the building and facilities side, which we haven't talked about yet, which is it's not the bulk of this job, but as we envision the changes, it is a component of the job, and just to understand from you what your skill and experience would be in that area.
Mostly from a capital, admittedly, more than a maintenance point of view. I talk about these pump stations we put in, and these are pump stations with conference rooms and bathrooms and locker rooms, and, you know, I've been involved with the bidding and the construction of those facilities and kind of how to get that done, per se. You know, bidding under 149 and under the laws that dictate, you know, how to bid out vertical construction. I've managed that. I will admit that I've done less maintenance. So, you know, I've done maintenance on the public works side, but maintenance on the vertical side, not as much. I'm confident I could pick it up, just given the rest of my skill set.
And what about the project management component in terms of the building project management?
That's how I started with it, absolutely. I mean, the public component bidding under 149, yeah, I'm very comfortable with that. Even if you have to do the filed sub-bids and so on, and managing different sub-bids, and, you know, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but you know, under 149 in Massachusetts is so unique, where the general contractor often doesn't control who the actual sub-bidder is. And half the time, I'm making them play nice, you know, together. And, but yeah, I definitely have experience doing that.
And you've talked a couple times about the NPDES program, and I gather you've got some experience in Framingham with it, which, you know, Framingham actually has I guess, a pretty functional stormwater infrastructure. How would you see your role in Sherborn with respect to our obligations under the MS4 regulations, and what needs to be done to get us and keep us in compliance there, and given all the, you know, resource constraints, et cetera?
Well, I've called it Sherborn's one utility, and it is a utility. In effect, and when this permit becomes effective, the town will be responsible for the water quality that comes out of those outfalls. I mean, yeah, I expect that the NPDES permit would fall under this position, particularly since it also involves facilities. Because remember, the stormwater system is not just the roadway; it's your facilities, your all town-owned properties, and any private property that discharges into the town's property. That is the town stormwater. And this is, I don't want to say it's unprecedented, because it's actually done elsewhere around the country quite a bit, but it's quite impressive in Massachusetts to have this happen. I mean, this has been, I think, in review for 8-9 years. You know, almost when I started Framingham was the initial discussions about this permit to modify the 2003, the original permit, which is quite a bit softer. So yeah, I do expect it would come under this, and, you know, there's quite a few milestones, and I don't know where the town sits from, you know, mapping to delineating each catchment area. So if you have an outfall, you actually have to draw up the little watershed that goes into that outfall. The sampling. Sherborn is actually, most of Sherborn is in the Charlesboro watershed, so there's an entire appendix that's multiple pages long. It's like 20 pages long, just on towns in the Charlesboro watershed, because it's a TMDL watershed, which means that you're going to have to mandate, you have to show reductions in actually your phosphate discharges and out of your stormwater system. There's quite a bit in there. You're going to have to treat the first inch of rainfall that comes down. Interestingly, and I don't know how public this is, but, you know, there's an appeal process going on in the federal court to appeal a NPDES permit. There's about 20 communities under the Massachusetts Coalition of Water Resources, teaming with Franklin and Lowell. And on Monday, we heard verbal indication that the EPA has actually agreed to a stay and so it actually might not become effective July 1 of this year. The original letter request actually requested that it become effective consistent with New Hampshire's permit, which is July 1, 2018, but that's still up in the air. They said they might get something in writing out at the end of this week.
And do you feel like, based on what you know about Sherborn from your planning board days and living in town, are we in a position to comply with these requirements, and what would we need to do to come into, to create a structure that would let us comply with these requirements?
I do. It'd be interesting to see, because I'm not super familiar how many catch basins you have, but I do know that the delineated area for the NIPD's permit is not the entire town, and Sherborn is one of the few areas on that. It'd be interesting. You will increase the maintenance you do of what they call non-structural BMPs. You will likely have to increase your street sweeping. I assume that's once a year. They'll have to go up from that in catch basin cleaning. Those are non-structural BMPs, and those you essentially get certain credit for reduction from that there. I believe by year 4 in the permit, you're going to have to actually install structural BMPs. That's the detention basins and so on like that, and show that progress. So to answer your question, I'd have to see. I do think we're reasonably well positioned. Most communities, and this one might have to look, are looking for an extra staff to actually help maintain some of this stormwater system, to be honest with you. But yeah, I'd have to see how the mapping looks, how your non-structural BMPs are being conducted right now, and give an assessment of, I can give you a better assessment on how we look for the 5-year permit.
Okay. Anybody else have further questions? Chuck?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought we were going to rotate through questions. Eric, the bad news is I have about a dozen questions. The good news is about 2 or 3 of them have been asked already. So could you describe, in your resume, you say that you oversee the Transportation Engineering Program and chair the town's Traffic, Roadway, and Safety Committee. Could you describe briefly what those two, what the program and what the committee does?
Well, the Traffic Roadway Safety Committee is an advisory committee to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen ultimately approve or not approve the actual changes in rules and regulations for the roadway. They heavily take, almost 99% of the time, take the advice of the Traffic Roadway Safety Committee. It's a committee of 7, has 2 from Public Works, 2 from Police, 1 from Fire, 1 from Planning Board, and 1 from the Selectmen. And I chair that, so we actually, take in the requests, determine if it warrants being progressed onto the agenda, go through the agenda, and make rules and regulations advising anything from, changing an intersection to a four-way stop, to signalizing intersection, to no parking regulations, the full gambit.
Kudos for the change in front of town hall. That rotary was sucked. It's a technical engineering term.
And I could talk forever, but those are actually cutting-edge adaptive signals that actually has a smart technology in it and can read queue lines. Yeah.
It's incredible how much better it is. Okay, can you describe what you've done for the capital improvements and the projects, and whether or not you've sought, how you've written the specifications for them, and whether or not you've sought any grants in Framingham for funding projects like that?
So the capital program, I could talk forever. I've literally either directly or through people who've worked for me overseen scores, if not hundreds of projects, and so on. But in a big global thing, when I became the Director of Planning and Design, I hired the staff, I created the policy procedures, and I created basically the program, the guide on how to do that. On how we would actually do a capital program, and it's still the backbone of that program right now. You learn fast that there's just so much more to it, that creating a program is more than just doing a bunch of multiple projects. We discovered very quickly the town of Framingham held very little easements. I've either directly or probably directly have overseen the acquisition of about 20 or 30 easements, and indirectly almost 150 in many ways there. What was your question about the road? Oh, the grants, yes. Yeah, some grants, our staff have gone for directly and acquired, like the DEP water quality grants, the complete streets. Has anyone seen Dudley Road, the bike path that we just constructed there? That was, kind of a simple idea I had just driving down the street, and it looked, and within a year it got built, and that was a $400,000 grant from Mass DOT. as well as some FEMA and MEPA grants to help upsize some culverts in town and abate some flooding issues. Indirectly, I've managed grants that have been more political grants, like Mass Life Sciences. We got about $13 million to up the water and sewer capacities for Genzyme. I've done the SRF funding process through water and sewer and stormwater projects, and then when the ERA funding came in, that supplemented that for several $million. And I also involved very heavily with the TIP, Transportation Improvement Project process. I'll be presenting in July, and I'll probably still be presenting no matter what, because I feel an obligation before the Project Review Committee on behalf of Framingham for a smaller intersection, but I also present before MAPC, and we've managed to keep the Union Ave project around $10 million on course for about 2021, and that type of stuff. The TIPs are very interesting. It's a beast by itself, and I don't think the town's ever gone through it.
This position, like I suspect from your resume, your positions with the town of Framingham involves working with lots of different appointed committees and elected boards, Board of Selectmen, Planning Board, Concom, Board of Health. Could you describe your experience in liaisoning with them? You've described what you did on the Traffic, Roadway, and Safety Committee, a cross-functional group, but can you describe, I think I've heard bits and pieces of it, but could you describe it?
I've presented before the Board of Selectmen several times, either for Traffic Roadway Safety Committee, property acquisitions, legal issues, or just simply just general information. They want updates on something. I go to quite a few Selectmen's meetings over the years. I've presented before the Conservation Commission, the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Planning Board, town meeting itself, and the dozen of subcommittees that town meeting exists. Town meeting in Framingham is probably the best 8 weeks of your life. I routinely meet in front of neighborhood groups. In fact, the presentation I gave Thursday was actually a summary of Framingham's public outreach program that we've done. Framingham, we could not have accomplished the great work that we've done over the last 10 years without buy-in from the community. And just to meet both on individuals in certain groups and neighborhood groups and go one-on-one and, educate the populace has actually been a pretty beneficial experience. But yeah, I've been, contentious. I've been in depositions. I've had, neighbors mad at me, People like the end product, but people don't like a 25-foot deep trench in front of their house. That's why they don't like getting there. And I've had the full gambit along that. Knock on wood, I've been pretty good with the property acquisitions. I've usually managed to actually keep the vast majority of the people happy as we, go through the easement acquisitions and so on like that. I've done groups for the, I actually headed up the acquisition of the Kachitchut Rail Trail. That's from Mass DOT and MBTA, just as they're becoming Mass DOT, or I should say MBTA and MTA. A Mass Turnpike Authority, and that is now the Kachitchut Rail Trail itself, but we actually purchased that piece of rail land, and we managed to do that because we actually found that if we installed a sewer interceptor there, we can actually eliminate a sewer pump station. Pump station was $2 million, the property acquisition was $770,000, and actually was cost beneficial, and there was quite a bit of public interface to actually accomplish that, as well as, meetings right up to the head of the, at the time, it was MBTA.
And how many members of a bargaining unit do you have in your current staff, and what experience have you had in supervising union employees and being the person they go to resolve matters involving either their work performance or the bargaining contract? I
have 5. There are 5 bargaining unit members that fall underneath me, and really, I've been blessed because they're a pretty good bunch, and if I treat them like adults, like I said, and I'm fair about them, then we have a good and take. You know what I mean? You always run into problems if someone gets to that point, oh, I'm a minute over, you owe me some four-hour minimum overtime, something else like that. That doesn't go a long way with me. But if you're okay, then I'm okay. I've had things like I'm looking to change someone's job description right now, and I meet with the union rep, and we see how we can make that work. And we try to make, again, set people up so that they want to come to work as well. And so I've had a good relationship. I've had to make hard decisions. I've had to make things, but because I don't make everything a battle, people tend to actually respect it. So, I'll have someone that, wants to use sick leave before a vacation, and I say, you have to use a vacation day. That's what it says here. I say, okay, because, overall, I'm pretty reasonable in my judgments like that.
And finally, to reassure you, you were in your discussion with Paul about snow and ice operations. I just want to note that the position description, which we spent a fair amount of time on, the Personnel Committee spent a fair amount of time on, doesn't expect you to drop a plow. It expects you to direct snow and ice operations, which isn't to say that in an emergency you might not have to, but the norm, the expectation, and the position description requires you to direct it. So,
And ultimately, I will say, you're responsible for your group. Small story, but I had a phone call come in at 12:30 at night once because some barrels went into the roadway, and so I could call someone and put it in. It's a Mass DOT project, not even our project. It doesn't matter. DPW is the face of the roads to the town, so I just drove up there and put the barrels up, you know what I mean, instead of calling someone else, whatever else. It's the performance department, so be it plowing or whatever else. If I need to do something, I'm going to do it, because ultimately, I, or whoever sits in this position, is responsible for the end product.
well, hopefully you dropped off those barrels at our garage, because we need them more than Framingham does.
I probably should have. Someday I'll tell you stories what it's like to work at Mass DOT.
So Eric's been up there for probably 50 minutes, which is a little longer than the other candidates got. I think we should try to wrap it up fairly soon. If somebody's got
I'm
any
done.
follow-up,
Thanks, Eric.
that'd be fine, but
Just, I want to follow up one thing. Doesn't Framingham have a human resources department?
Yes.
And who heads that?
Sadly, her name escapes me right now, but just escapes me right now. It's a woman who used to work at Newton.
Is it Marion Kelly?
No.
Used to be.
No.
Not her anymore.
It's probably a good sign that you don't know his or her name.
Well, that was actually my point, because you're saying you're hiring people and you're letting people go, and you don't have HR working with you on that?
I do at times, but to be honest, I tend to handle things before they make it up to HR. I tend to have people satisfied with my decisions and handle it before it gets to them. It actually is an HR rep that comes in with us and actually does the, what do you call it? Does the hiring and the interviews. That's Judy. And the actual director itself, I don't hear from her a whole lot. I tend to handle it. It's like I said, I managed to actually make my department function very well and very independently. And as a result, people have essentially allowed me to do that and give me a fair amount of latitude over the years.
So you have an HR person who actually participates in the hiring?
Yeah, they'll sit in interviews. They do every single interview. So actually, there's an HR rep that sits in every single interview for the entire town of Framingham to make sure it's fair.
And when it comes time to firing, you were talking about all the tough decisions you make. You don't have HR working with you on that?
So I actually had someone else from Public Works act in as a witness, and we actually had the forms from town council when I did one termination. On another one, I had progressive reviews, and I told her that we're going to move forward with a termination. As a result, she agreed to resign right then and there, kept it clean, and I had that happen again, where I had the same thing, and I sat down with a person. It's no surprise, because if you're not performing, by the time it gets to that level, you'll know it. And it was the same thing. I said, we're going to move forward. We're going to move forward with these termination procedures, and here's how we're going to do it. I've set up the whole outline, and they also agreed to resign.
Well, don't you need the sign-off from HR and the town manager and the DPW director, Peter Sellers, before you fire somebody?
They see the performance reviews. By the time I do it, I have basically a progressive discipline, and the reviews go up there. And I definitely chat with Peter Sellers, and every time I'm going through this, I let him know that we have someone that's not performing and so on, and he lets me do it with my latitude.
So that's a yes? You get sign-offs from, let's take it one at a time. You have a sign-off from the DPW director What's Peter's title?
DPW Director.
Okay, you got a sign off from Peter Sellers?
When you say sign off, do I have them physically sign a form? No. That's what you mean by sign off? Do I have their agreement? Yes.
Okay, do you have the agreement of HR?
Sometimes it doesn't go there. Sometimes we handle it within the department. It is different. I mean, think about it, the Framingham DPW. How many employees does the town of Sherborn have?
A lot less than 165 that just work for the DPW.
Exactly. So when you have something like that, you have to have strong authority in the department heads and strong trust in the department heads. And that is how I've operated.
And do you get the sign off from the town manager? Approval from the town manager?
More just
before you-
indirectly, he'll see the performance review and he'll be aware of what's going on.
But I don't understand, is that a yes, the town manager authorizes the termination, or the town manager does not authorize the termination?
As much as you want a yes/no answer, he's aware of what's going on. And that is my answer. I have the approval from the DPW director and knowledge from HR and the town manager.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, you said you had one.
Yeah. When you were Director of Planning and Design from 2008 to 2014, and you had a leadership of a team of project managers, how many people was that?
It was 6 total, 5 senior project managers and then a seasonal employee.
Thanks.
So Eric, we've concluded the questioning, and so we would give you the opportunity to make any concluding comments, or if there's a question we didn't ask that you wish we had asked, let us know that and answer that as well, whatever you want to do.
Okay, I mean, I'll just close. I think, you see my resume, you've asked the questions. I've had pretty much progressive experience over the last 20 years, and both hands-on, on actually, doing work myself, kind of in an engineering capacity, as well as kind of an oversight. I've, I serve as a pretty seasoned DPW professional, coming from Public Works. I have strong connections in other proximity of other department works. Strong connections with Framingham and Natick and Plainville and Wayland. All of either I've known and can draw from ideas, and we all kind of share ideas with each other. I have strong line management, and that's why I do encourage you to call people that have worked for me, and I can provide references because they can tell you that. Different line management styles they've seen that have worked and not worked. I have good knowledge of overall infrastructure, not just from an engineering point of view, but what actually works. I think someone commented on some of the conditions of the roadways, and it's funny, we all talk about the spot milling that was done on Forest Street and how the pavement came up on that right away. Very obviously, the pavement was too cool by the time it went down. They probably had a small truck, they probably took it from a plant, they didn't have a heated bed, and boom, the pavement comes up in 3 days. I have a pretty good hands-on knowledge like that. I think of just even last week, I look at the type of work I reviewed. I was reviewing a ADA compliant sidewalk, kind of a small project there. I was reviewing signal timing, and I was reviewing a underpass design of 135 under 126 for $120 million estimate. So I've had that big gambit of experience and infrastructure and line management. And I think I identified, I love this town. My family's loved it for generations, and it is really the reason that I'm here right now, is this a passion for this town, a town that's been good to me over the years, and good to my family.
Great. Thank you very much for coming in. Okay. Folks want to talk up here? Do we want to take public comment? What's the preference?
I have a request that we release a opinion of town council. If you recall, I had questioned the fact that we were having an interview that was separate from the other interviews so that the candidate could have the benefit of seeing what everybody else's answers were, and had his name wasn't disclosed at all and wasn't on the agenda. And so I had asked town council, was that consistent with the open meeting law not to disclose the name of the person. And there was a email from, forget his name, at the Copeland and Page. Darren Klein. I would request that that be, my question and the reply be made available to the public.
I'd like to see the opinion before I
Yeah, so then,
vote on that, because I don't know if there's any, privileged attorney-client communication in there.
right.
Well, I don't believe there is, but can we?
I don't know, I haven't seen
Haven't
it, so
seen
I
it either,
can't,
Paul.
I have trouble opining on something I haven't seen.
I don't think any of us have seen it. Do you have copies of it?
I have it electronically. I'm happy to read it to you all, but
Well, that would kind of defeat the purpose of a vote, wouldn't it?
Dave has
You
it.
can paraphrase it without violating anything.
Well,
End
what's-
result was there was no
what's the
open
point?
meeting
Yeah,
violation.
what would you like us to do after we release this?
Just in interests of transparency and full disclosure in the process.
Was this an email that was
I
circulated?
don't, I haven't seen
I
it.
haven't seen it either.
Is it an email I missed, because I don't recall seeing anything?
I thought it went to the whole board.
I didn't see the request or the response, Paul.
I thought the town administrator had circulated it to the entire board.
Well, unless I missed it. What's the purpose of releasing it? What's the concern?
And Paul's correct, Dave circulated it this morning, I missed it, 9:35 a.m.
Oh, this is the one about the posting?
Yes. My concern had been that we had disclosed the names of 4 people last week, but not the name of the 5th. And the name of the 5th only was posted today. And the open meeting law says that agendas are supposed to be published 48 hours in advance so that the public would know who was being interviewed, was my concern.
Okay.
And town council considered that and made some statements. So I think all that should be part of the record.
I mean, do you want me to explain what happened with the posting?
No,
I put it in the email.
I think it should be just read into the record. It's my request.
I don't have any problem with that.
I mean, I think you're inferring or implying that we had an open meeting violation, and this clearly says there wasn't.
Correct.
I'm not implying anything. I just think it's part of the record.
Fine.
I think Paul was concerned about that and asked the question and got an answer.
Right. I think there are other people out in the public who have the same question. And rather than leaving a lot of things, loose ends out there, it's better for the process, better for the board, better for the public to see what town council's been telling us.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it either, I've just read it.
Okay. So David, you want to just read it?
You're welcome to read your memo too if you want.
Would somebody else mind reading it? I can read it, but I'm dry-mouthed right now.
Chuck, maybe you could read
Yeah,
it.
this is an email from Darren Klein, dated this morning, just before 8 a.m. David, I'm sorry, Darren Klein is, I believe, a partner at KP Law, our retained law firm. I'm not sure whether he's a partner or not, but that's irrelevant. He's an attorney there. David, please see the email below. as a follow-up to our emails and discussion yesterday, and in response to the question from Attorney DeRensis, it is my opinion that there is no, underlined, open meeting law violation. It is my understanding that the meeting was properly posted on Friday with the following agenda items, quote, continuation of CM&D director interviews, close quotes, and another item, quote, consideration of hiring CM&D director or next steps, close quotes. It's my further understanding that the fifth candidate did not agree to have his name go public and to be interviewed in open session until yesterday. As such, it would not have been proper or reasonably foreseeable to put his name on the agenda on Friday. It is my understanding that you forwarded his name for inclusion on the agenda yesterday afternoon to the town clerk, but the town clerk was not available until this morning to add the name to the agenda, which will be done forthwith this morning.
When was that written? Yesterday?
This morning at 7:57 a.m.
This says it was updated on Monday.
Accordingly, in my opinion, you have used reasonable efforts to update the agenda when the information became available, and adding the name to the agenda this morning is not an open meeting law violation, but rather a best practice and allowable given all of the facts. Please contact me with any further questions. Thank you, Darren Klein.
And when I forwarded this to the selectmen, my note pointed out that it was yesterday afternoon, the clerk was here, that we gave the name to revise the agenda, but she didn't update it, and it was updated by her staff this morning at 7:30.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now we're supposed to have consideration of hiring or next steps. So I'll take any suggestions anybody has as to how we would proceed at this point. Do we want to have selectmen discussion now? Do we want to have public comment and then selectmen discussion?
Let's do public comment.
Okay. All right, so we'll open this to public comment. If anybody has any more comments, you don't have to repeat things we've already heard from before the meeting, but if anybody has any additional comments, we'd love to hear them at this point. Okay, doesn't look like there's any more public comment, Paul. So do we want to have discussion up at the board?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I had said at the end of the Thursday session that I was prepared to vote, and then we had Neil McPherson point out that there was no assessment centers done for these candidates. And an assessment center is a process by which we have tested, or other communities test, officials like a chief of police or a fire chief to determine if they know their stuff. The idea is to put them into simulated operational situations and see what their answers are. Neil had recommended that that be done in this case. I see that has some sense, but to me, I see one candidate I think would be my preference. So I guess my first position is to see if the board agrees with me on that one, and then if you don't, then to suggest that we have an assessment center to rate the two strongest candidates and see what that comes back as.
Okay. Chuck or Mark?
Well, I didn't have the benefit of the interviews with the other three candidates, but I have had the benefit and privilege of working with Sean for the last 2 years as a selectman, and I also served with Eric for 2 years on the planning board when we were considering a very contentious project, the Pulte Maple Street project, and a very complicated project for Abbey Road. So I would echo what Andy said. I think Andy's left. We bored him already. I think we are blessed to have two candidates from Sherborn who have just a wide range of qualifications, and they both have volunteered to the town, served the town ably. So I just perhaps it's unfair. I've only seen the other three candidates' resumes, but my preference is, it's one of the reasons why I like having elected officials who live in town. I think people who have a commitment to the town don't treat it as just a job, that they bring more passion and commitment to it. So I am happy that all five candidates were willing to come forward to be considered. I wasn't a member of the Fire Chief Selection Committee, but we ended up with a candidate that we were very happy with, and a lot of other candidates that we were not at all excited about. And I'm kudos to Dave for shepherding this on pretty short notice. So I'm going to limit my consideration to Sean and Eric.
Did you have a chance to see the videos yet, or of the?
I watched most of them.
Yeah.
It's not the same as being here and being able to ask questions, but so.
But you at least got a flavor of
Right.
of all the candidates, yeah,
Yep.
just out of fairness to them.
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
Anything, Mark?
Yeah, I think, well, before we move on to that, I mean, we sort of gave everybody a pass on the snow plowing, and I don't think that our director should be snow plowing either, but we do look for, it says on desirable skills, CDL, Class B, Class 2A, hoisting engineer, et cetera, and so forth. But I don't see that, of the two people in here that I would consider as candidates, I don't see that on either of their resumes. And I have to assume that that's something we're willing to waive.
I don't think,
Sean said he had those.
what do you think needs to be waived?
Under Section 3, Education, Training, and Experience, desirable skills and licenses, and there's a number of licenses related to operating machinery.
Well, you don't have to waive anything that's desired or preferred. You only have to waive something that's required.
Right. But I think maybe not in the legal sense of that term, but more in the, what are we willing to compromise on? Which I, for one, am willing to do that.
Well, I think we also have a requirement of 5 years of professional experience in public works.
Yeah, no, that I'm not willing to,
I mean, that would, I think one of the
To,
candidates would require a waiver of that.
I'm not willing to waver on.
Based on what Mark said, it looks like there's a consensus. You haven't spoken, Mike, but it looks like there's a consensus to take the poll from 5 to 2 and have like two finalists.
That's not what I said. I think there's very clearly a strongest candidate. And I think it's the person we interviewed tonight. I think we'd be fortunate to hire him, and if we weren't able to do that, then there's perhaps another candidate in here.
I would say, the reason why I mentioned going from 4 to 2, I thought we could focus the discussion. I feel that the candidate that we saw on Thursday was stronger than the candidate we saw here. So I was suggesting that we narrow things down to just those two for purposes of further discussion, rather than talking about all 5 of them as an intermediary step. If you don't want to do that, that's fine.
I think that's a fair thing to do. I mean, I would say I think all 5 of the candidates David brought back have good qualifications, could probably do the job, but we know what it's like to work in the environment of the town of Sherborn. And I think being someone who's from the town of Sherborn is a great advantage in this position. It could also be a disadvantage, but it's certainly an advantage to at least have an appreciation of how the town operates, how at a very micro level it gets incredibly personal, and what kind of a distraction that can cause if you're not able to navigate that. And I think we have 2 candidates who are worth discussing in that respect further. So I would agree with Paul to narrow the field and have that discussion.
So can I make that a motion that we have 2 finalists out of the 5?
Sure. You just make that motion?
Just, so moved.
Okay. Anybody want to second that motion?
I'm not sure we need a formal motion. I'm happy to, I completely agree that I think we have two
So we have a consensus of doing that.
two lead candidates, but
Okay, we have a consensus to do that.
Not to spoil the party, but I think we ought to also consider Paul Kane in this. He's got a real breadth of experience and has done the job. You know, I would think would be the other candidate in here that we would consider.
So you want to narrow it to 3?
I'd like to keep him in the pool.
So if I amend the motion to narrow it to 3, you would support it?
I would.
So I'll make that, take that as a friendly amendment on the motion to narrow it.
Okay. I'm just looking at my notes. Okay. Well, do we want to have an assessment center, Paul? Is that what you were pushing for before? You have multiple candidates?
Well, well, have we narrowed it to 3? Can we vote on that first?
I mean, I was content with 2, but
yeah, I am as well. Mr. Keene had a very interesting background. He's also had just a large number of very short stints, which maybe this is what separates me from millennials, but I prefer to see people that have been someplace for a while. There were a bunch of 6-month, 1-year positions, and
So you want to go to 2?
I would support going to 2, particularly if we're doing the assessment center. I'm basically saying I don't
It's okay. You can disagree.
agree with Mark that we have 3 equal candidates. I think we have two candidates that would limit it to.
Well, then go back to moving that we have 2 finalists out of, narrow it from 5 to 2.
Well, I think, again, I think if you look at the experience, you'll find that, our quote-unquote 2 top candidates are perhaps both a little light on one side or the other, whereas regardless of his background, Mr. Kane has done the job and has more experience than either of them. So I think it's a strong recommendation to keep him in. I don't see what we gain by excluding him at this point.
Well, I personally was not as impressed with him as I was with the other 2, what I would call leading candidates. And I don't want to find fault with anybody, so I'm not going to go there. I would say that the assets that the other 2 bring, both their Sherborn connection, their familiarity with the town, the skills that they presented, their enthusiasm and commitment for the position puts them way ahead of the other 3. So that's, and I think by bringing it to 2.
I think you're also assuming that we can come to agreement with whoever your top candidate is, and if we can't, we may want to have more options available to us. I just don't understand why we would restrict our options in this case.
Well, I don't think we are.
Well, why don't we, to bridge that gap, why don't we say, for discussion purposes, we'll focus on the 2 candidates who there's a consensus about, but we won't cut anybody loose at this point, since we had 5 ostensibly on paper qualified candidates.
Well, I had one question about Paul Keene, which is the PD, the position description, as I read it, requires a bachelor's degree in civil engineering or other appropriate discipline, and I'm not sure that Mr. Keene has that.
Let's see, he says, this...
Bachelor of Science in Civil
Bachelor of Science in
Engineering
Civil Engineering,
from Northeastern.
What page are you on?
very first
Top of the
line at
first
the top of
page.
the resume.
Oh, I'm always looking at the bottom, so,
That's where it
Read it
belongs,
backwards,
but-
I get it.
yeah, so, oh, you mean where it says BS in civil engineering?
Yeah, that's the part.
I withdraw that comment.
Very good.
So as modified by Mike, I'll restate the motion then that we, for purposes of further consideration, we consider the,
Before you go through that, I mean, I think we send a very strong message to a candidate if we don't include them in that pool,
In the assessment?
in the assessment. I mean, if we don't reach agreement with either of the other candidates, and now we have to go to this person and say, you weren't really in our pool, it makes it that much more difficult. And gets us off on the wrong foot if he ends up being our person.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't see a lot of passion in that candidate. I think he has some good experience. I also think he really wanted to move back to this area, so I suspect he'll still be around if our other candidates drop out of the picture. I don't know. I think that's a risk I'd be willing to take at this point. I'm not saying cut him loose, but I'm just saying I think we ought to focus
Well,
on.
I think you do cut him loose if you don't include him.
In the assessment, you
Would
mean?
Would you take that job?
Depends on how badly you want to move to the next town over from where you live. Instead of commuting an hour and a half.
Well, let's put it to a vote.
Okay.
Now, if Mark is interested in the candidate, I would be inclined to expand it to 3. The assessment center doesn't, at least for the fire chief selection, didn't take that long. It involves, to your point, you don't want to, or maybe in your point, Paul, you don't want to mislead somebody because it involves some work on their part. But I have no objection to including all 3 in the assessment center.
How would you do this assessment center, David? I mean, because I can see you're kind of befuddled, I think, about this whole concept of how we would do it, because you're really testing a bunch of different things, right?
Well, yeah, to bring in public works people, like, that I had lined up for an assessment, wouldn't necessarily be fair, because they wouldn't be covering the 10 or 20% of the jobs that's facilities and buildings. And you also have varied, everybody has some buildings experience that I guess should be assessed.
I think management skill is part of what we would want to assess anyway.
If we scrapped trying to figure out who is more knowledgeable about construction or public works things and went to an assessment that's a management assessment, that would probably be more helpful to the board,
No, I
because they're
think-
all going to pass, or
I don't think so. I think the reason why I favor one candidate over the other is I see one candidate with hands-on practical experience who knows how to solve problems mechanically on the field. If we have a dump truck that's burning, who knows how to deal with it, as opposed to theoretical and paper experience. So that's exactly one of the things I want to have.
So make sure the
tested.
assessment includes a burning dump truck, David.
yeah, luckily.
I nominate, no.
But it should include somebody from the engineering side.
Yeah, I think we should test buildings, maintenance, engineering, basic operations.
Well, we should test personnel manager if we're going to test anything.
I have a current public works director and a retired public works director. That's who is lined up to do the assessments.
But not somebody from Sherborn, or formerly from Sherborn.
No, but when you have somebody that's a well-known person that's gone around speaking at public, there's going to be a bias when you have a public works director interviewing a public works person compared to a public works director interviewing somebody that they don't know what they do.
The purpose of this is to get unbiased people who are going to see what's the instincts that these people have. And if somebody's instinct is going to lead to, somebody getting killed, that's one result. The instinct is that the person it's just like when you're electing a president of the United States. You want to know, what are they going to do on the stuff that we haven't anticipated? What's their character, or how they reason?
It's probably not a great example.
This isn't
I
about
see a bunch of
politics.
people biting their tongues.
If you, I mean, you could kick it out and give it to Collins Center to come in and do a regular assessment so that it's completely unbiased. Otherwise, I'm picking the people, and people are going to take pot shots that they're biased or they're not biased. And it's just, I don't think you're going to gain anything from the assessment center unless you specifically tell me what area it is that you need answered from both of them. But they both have construction abilities, and I don't, we've already said that both of them can do the job.
The two people we've been talking about, I think, have different strong suits and different weak suits,
Mhm.
or different concerns. And I think it would be fair to try to assess both of them in the areas where we're concerned one or the other of them may be lacking. And if that means you go to the Collins Center and you say, this is the job description, figure out how to do an assessment for it, that's fine. But how long does that take, David?
It's going to take a while. It's going to take too long, and it's going to be expensive.
Well, let me comment about that. The modern way of hiring important department heads like this is doing an assessment center. And it's one that I recommend even for town administrators. The whole process of, like, hiring a town administrator, you have people come in and they say, here's all the wonderful things I'm going to do to a community. But when you have somebody testing them, so if you had a situation where this and that and everything else, and you get their answers, and you have people who have done it, evaluate it, and tell you, well, objectively who's got better instincts, that makes it a lot easier for the board. And particularly where you've got two local candidates, it seems to me fundamentally our job is to pick the best for the town. Who is going to be the best for the town? And if we are doing it based on a 15 or 20-minute interview and the answers to questions, I think it's obvious that one candidate is stronger than the other, but Mark thinks the other one is stronger than the one I think is stronger. So it looks like reasonable people can come to different conclusions. Well, how do Mark and I resolve that? He can argue for an hour, I can argue for an hour, but if you had an expert come in and say, hey, I gave these guys a test, and one has a score of 100 and the other one has a score of 20, then it's objective.
I mean, that was the plan from the beginning, yeah, we were going to do that. But to find either I go with the people I have, or you give me more time to find
Yeah,
people from far away.
And you're
To be
conflicted-
fair, we need to remind ourselves that we talked about having an interim, and we, the board, collectively decided, not you, on a more aggressive timeline, so that was our call.
And your concern around the two people you have is that they're not going to be impartial, perhaps, because they know one or the other of them.
If you're bringing in public works people, they're going to look at the job description to see what you're looking to hire. They're going to go through it, and they're going to assess the person on that job and what they feel based on their own knowledge. So you have...
So it's somewhat unique, and you're concerned that they wouldn't have a broad enough lens.
You only talk about
perhaps.
municipal public works people, David? Is that who you're bringing in?
Yeah.
What, would you go to like a state agency, find somebody who's got public works experience at a different level, or who might have worked up through the ranks and is not going to be personally as close to, whatever you're worried about? Is that another way to go about it? Or find somebody who's at a consulting firm who's got a background in public works or something like that?
And what's the end result you want? Answer on which one is...
Well, no, I mean, you're concerned with bias in the people who are doing the testing because somebody knows somebody who's a DPW director. I was trying to get you out of that loop and thinking more broadly about who might be suitable for an assessment, who would have the substantive skill but wouldn't be currently in that community. I don't know. You've got a better suggestion, Skip?
I got a curveball to throw at you.
Yeah.
Why don't you ask a couple of the previous CM&D directors at Sherborn to do these interviews, not to think of two guys.
Yeah, who would the two guys be?
Mike Baxis,
Yeah.
who's the CM&D director for the town of Walsall.
Is he still there?
I believe he is. And Gary Keller, who's out on the other end of the state. Both of them, very good knowledge of Sherborn. Both know the courage of this town.
Excellent.
Both know what the CM&D job entails. Both of them left with pretty good, whatever of the town. They both invested in the town, left for different reasons. They're both CM&D directors. They both had a wealth of experience. Both of them, highway department plus private. So, you give them a list of questions, let them do it.
I love it.
Are they similarly conflicted in terms of who they know and who they don't know?
Probably, maybe not.
That's honest, thank you.
The fellow from the western part
I
of the
mean,
state probably most
I
likely.
remember Mike Paxis from when I was on planning board. I think very highly of him. I thought he did a good job when he was here.
Yeah, he was a good guy.
He came back and helped us.
I remember that too, temporarily or something.
And he has reached out to Sherborn Sherborn's reached out to him, and he has helped us previously, with other things, as well as personnel.
Yeah. It's not a terrible idea.
I think it's a great idea. I'm concerned that our department is somewhat unique. I mean, yeah, I understand at DPW, it's got 165 employees, and I have a sense of how that operates. We have a small little department, we're a small little town, and it operates very differently. If we have two guys who are familiar with that,
We've done the job.
who've done the job, they know what has to be done.
Paul, you know what, you're making a different point, too, which is, I think this would be a really easy decision if we were hiring Framingham's Public Works Director,
Yeah.
or, Ashland's.
Or Wellesley.
Or Newton's, or Wellesley's. I don't know that it's an easy decision when we're hiring somebody to work in this town. That's really what I'm struggling with a little bit. I think there's a real intangible to working in this town, given our dynamics.
The second
better
person you
That's why I
mentioned, how
thought-
large is his department?
The what?
The second person you mentioned who
Gary
was-
Kelleher.
Gary Kelleher, who was the CM&D director here from
Like,
2000.
yeah, 2000 or something.
To about 2011.
Where is he now?
He's in Rutland, Mass.
Oh, he really moved up.
No, actually, he just goes to the home. That was, I mean, it's the next town over from where he lives.
It's just a small town like us, it's just a different place.
I mean, I think that's an interesting idea, and maybe one of them should be part of it. I'm more concerned that we're going to turn this into a giant echo chamber if we're trying to do something different here. What about,
Well, I think Patches is different.
I don't-
mean,
I don't
he's
know.
in a completely different environment. In fact, he left here, I think, because, if I'm remembering right, partly because he wanted a more professional job. He was trying to move up.
and that's fine, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but I think that I would be cautious about relying too much on that. What about a couple of your fellow town administrators? Explain to them, this is what we're trying to do.
That's not bad either.
you
That's an
know,
interesing idea, because
Because they'll be able.
they're the ones that
they'll
have to supervise.
They'll have the perspective
Right.
of.
And they
of-
barely have any technical abilities.
Well, because
but
it's
they-
technical, but what about the
but they've
management side? of things?
supervised.
One might say none.
They've hired.
See, but David, on the management side, on the personnel.
Right.
Management side, which I think is a real issue here, based on comments we've had from the public and otherwise.
But I thought that we just rejected that that's not what you wanted as an assessment
I
center.
don't think that's the only thing you want, but it would give you that
It's an
dimension
important
potentially.
piece.
Every question Mark asked was about that. Paul asked questions about that.
And I would add, I've been consistent on all the recent hirings, including the fire chief that we just hired, that we want to learn before we hire people whether they don't know how to, they don't know a monkey wrench from a hammer. We want to learn that before we hire them, not after we hire them, and then find they don't know what they're doing. Because the job here is a little different than, this is a unique town in many ways, let me put it that way.
You want a town manager and a public works person.
I think that's what we're hearing.
Okay.
But I mean, a public works person who understands the Sherborn environment. I actually thought Skip's particular suggestions were good if they'll do it, one of them at least.
Yeah, a panel of three is,
You need three.
Yeah, I would say both Gary and
I wouldn't agree with that.
I don't know that you need both Gary and Mike, but I think they both bring a similar, I mean, well, whatever. I'm not going to get too micromanaging on this. It's kind of David's
I agree.
expertise.
I have a slight preference for a panel of three rather than two, but part of it depends on how quickly we can get somebody to volunteer. I'd rather pay mileage from Wellesley than from Rutland.
But I think we also want the engineering piece.
Yeah.
Since we've included that now, I mean, if a DPW person looks at it, I'm not sure they're going to look at it as broadly as what we're trying to achieve here.
I mean, I don't want to underestimate the human resources component of it either, David. I mean, I think our failings in hiring, since I've been on the Board of Selectmen and even before, have largely revolved around people who had those kinds of difficulties, either interpersonal difficulties or, their own time management or other difficulties. It wasn't necessarily substantive skill. There might have been some of that too. I guess maybe I'm less aware of that, but it was really much more on the social side of things. And I want to make sure that we've got some objective feedback on that if we can. From the standpoint that Paul raises of presenting a situation and seeing who's got instincts or a sound approach.
Yeah, the point of the assessment center is you ask each candidate separately, you give them a hypothetical. Like in the fire chief case, you'd say, well, if the building's burning down on one side of town and another building's burning down on the other side of town and you have only one fire truck, what do you do? And you get the answers from all three, and then you have a panel of, three fire chiefs, and they look at it and they say, what's the better judgment and what's the
No,
weaker
we get it. I
judgment?
think we get it, yeah. We get it. All right, so what's the preference of the board, to have two people go to those assessments at this point? The two lead candidates, schedule them for an assessment, convene back here in however many weeks it's going to take to do this?
I'm still on 3.
I know, but I don't think you have the votes on 3.
Just want to throw it out there.
Understood.
You want 3, 2?
No, Mark makes a good point, but in my mind, there are two clear leading candidates. I would leave it at 2. If we can't reach agreement with both of them, I think you made a fair point. This is,
I think you're back to a new search.
but right at this point, I would limit it to 2.
So I'd like to limit it to 2, too.
So would I.
So I think that's the response, 3 to 1, on limiting it to 2.
Okay.
But with the proviso that we keep it open.
Yeah. Got that part?
Okay.
So are we done?
So when do we think we can,
I think,
Come back.
Sue Talley, you had a comment, I think. I saw your hand before. Are you looking to speak?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking as far as eliminating the 2, whether you were still doing, who's going to do the assessments. My only comment on the assessments is you're talking Mike Paxton from Holliston, who's had experience in the township, and then Gary Kelleher, who was the CM&D director just prior to Ed Rankin. They both of them obviously have experience in the town, and they also know the personnel that we're discussing, the 2 you're bringing forward. My only comment to that is, should there not be a third independent person that David Williams, town administrator, was being, that does not know the 2 parties personally, has not met them, and is more unbiased, is looking at their human resource skills, their minutes.
I think we talked about David finding 3 people.
We agreed to that.
I think we already did.
Only one of which would be a Sherborn, ex-Sherborn employee.
You got that, David?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
So when can we,
When do you think this would be done,
Next
David? By
steps.
like mid-July, or what's the?
I'll have a better idea tomorrow.
You'll know tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right, when's our next meeting schedule? We can cancel tomorrow night's meeting, we don't need that. When's our next meeting scheduled? I would suggest we maybe come back the week of July 10th, one of those nights. Not necessarily for this, but just for a regular business meeting. You want to do Thursday, July 13th?
Works for me.
me too.
Okay, thanks, Paul. You all right with that?
I'm looking. I'm not as agile with my big fat fingers and the small little.
We'll scratch out in the dirt with a stick for you, Paul.
July. The 13th?
Thursday, the 13th.
Yeah, which would have been our normal night anyway.
Oh, I have a Massachusetts Selectmen's Association meeting.
But that's not as important as your role as a selectman at Sherborn, I'm sure.
Well, I'm supposed to represent all of Middlesex County.
The 12th works for me.
Yeah.
Mike, I agree with you. I like having regular Thursday meetings, but probably less critical in the summer.
I don't know, Mark.
This would work for
Is
me.
it sometimes bad for Mark?
Not during the summer.
This will
Good.
work for me, because the MSA
12th
meeting
or the 13th?
is at 8 o'clock in the morning.
So you
Not
think you have
8
enough
o'clock at
time to
night.
get, you have enough time to get from there to here? Okay.
Yes.
All right, good.
Depends how long
So-
people talk. I touch and go, but we'll risk it.
All right, the 13th, thank you, Paul.
So we'll do it the 13th.
That was rich, that was good.
I'd read it as 8 o'clock at night, but it's 8 o'clock in the
Fantastic.
morning.
Okay, do we want to adjourn?
Well,
Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight, I think.
actually,
This has provoked more interest than pretty much anything else we do, so
before everyone leaves,
appreciate it.
I'd like to, Michael Lesser and I went last night to the State Green Communities Initiative, and the town of Sherborn, thanks to Gino Carlucci and Michael's application, received a grant of $39,120 for the police station's HVAC system.
It's great.
So,
Good.
thank you, Michael and Gino.
They're doing a great job with that energy committee. It's fantastic.
They really are. And I also received a $1 check from the Sherborn Community Center Foundation, but I left it on my bureau at
That's going to
home,
help
so.
with free cash, isn't it?
Will you take cash?
I think you should have taken silver.
Yeah.
rather
All
than
right,
check.
thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, all in favor of
Second.
adjourning? Thank you. All right, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mark.